All right, so let me know what questions you have. So it sounds like you're deciding between PhD or DRP, or just you want to get your doctorate degree, which is great. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I did want to ask you, Jessica, have you ever considered a PhD track versus, a DRPH before, right? Or were you kind of thinking, straight up, I just want to do the PhD?
No, that's a great question. I was actually exactly in this place when I was applying. I was thinking, okay, DRPH or PhD. And I had always heard, okay, PhD is more research oriented, DRPH is more practice oriented, but they're still both doctoral level degrees. And there are people who become, faculty professors that have both degrees. So it seemed I was like, okay, so what is the difference, or like how will this impact me? And I remember when I was applying to different schools, or like networking with professors at different schools, and if they had both options, I would just straight up ask the professor, like, do you think I would be a better fit for the DRPH or the PhD program? And depending on how they answered that, I kind of just like followed that path. For the most part, I was applying to all PhD programs. Like most of the programs I applied to were PhD because that's more popular, like more schools have that program. But Harvard was one of the places that had both. And it's interesting because for the DRPH, they actually also recommend that you have like multiple years of work experience before, and I didn't have that. But I remember talking to my who then became my advisor on the phone at Harvard before I applied. I was like, "Do you think I should do DRPH or PhD?" And then he was like, if you want to do research and if you want like that more clear path, like I would get I would go for the PhD. The DRPH really is not meant for people who like come in with like more of the like, I want to do research background. And I was kind of coming a little bit more from that angle at that time. I didn't really like have a ton of like public health practice work experience. I was just finishing up my MPH, Um, and then when I was not interviewing, sorry, networking at Columbia,
Mhm.
I was speaking with a faculty member there, and I asked the same question. And funny enough, they gave me a very different response. They were like, even though you are very like research oriented, the PhD program here is like very philosophical and
Mm,
theory and like very heavy in that direction. Whereas like the DRPH program is a little bit more kind of like practical, like you kind of just like you don't have to think like, as I don't know how to, but he was like, yeah, so if you like all the PhD students, they have to spend their first year like in some really like intense like social medical like theory, philosophy, history of medicine, like really intense seminar. And if like that's not something
right.
that's, going to be appealing for you, you might want to go the DRPH route and then just make it more research oriented. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I applied to the DRPH program when I applied to Columbia. Um, a couple of things that I've also just heard, and this is
Yeah.
again just what I've heard, but not what I think is true, is that um, PhD programs are a little bit more universal. Like it's everyone knows kind of what a PhD is, whereas like a DRPH is also like a really the highest level, like a really high level degree, but people really only in the field of public health like truly know what a DRPH means. So like if you go to like another place that might not have a public health program, or I don't even know like internationally, but like it's just not, this doesn't carry the same like general recognition as like a PhD does. That's the only, but I've never actually like, I've only heard of that. I've never actually seen that kind of manifest in a way where it's like negatively impacted someone with a DRPH. Like I don't think it actually matters, but I've just heard people say that.
No, I also never knew about the DRPH until I started like seeing, more professors in the program like having a DRPH. I was like, oh, I didn't know even that was a thing. I was like always knew obviously there's a PhD program for public health, but I was
Yeah.
also the same way where but I appreciate you for, I think you're just being so smart about networking and asking people because I feel like, your mentors, your professors, like they know you. they know you as a student, as a worker. So I feel like maybe that's something I should do. I'm like, which one do you think, I'm more of?
Yeah,
And
and
I
they'll be able to
know,
tell you specifics about their program because like I said, every school is different in what they require. So like the whole thing about Columbia, like I wouldn't have known that. And that's definitely not the case at every other institution. So like every program has their own kind of uniqueness. And you want to find that out. And if that's going to make a difference in whether you apply to which type of degree
right,
program.
absolutely. And I know, Jessica, you said that you're currently working as a postdoc, right? As a postdoc researcher at Stanford. Congrats. And yeah, I know I read your blog a little bit, but it said that, you do want to become a professor. Is that something, that you're still thinking of, or you're kind of like, maybe that's not what I want to do? Like, can I get like a little timeline of, what you want to
Yeah.
do, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's my dream is to find a faculty position and be a professor and teach and do research and be on a college campus doing that and, mentoring students to also. That's why I have this whole kind of like channel and everything. I love mentoring so much that I've made it a huge part of my journey so far, and I want to continue onward and, yeah, become a professor in that. There are definitely days when I wake up and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much work. Like I'm so like it's a long journey that has a lot of uncertainty because I don't know when a job is going to open up that or like that I'll get or it's a difficult journey for sure, but I still am wanting to go down. I'm going to try my best before I give up. So, yeah.
No, I could totally see that. I feel like this is the vibe that we're giving. And are you finding that a lot of your colleagues that, that you're friends with, in the program are also heading towards that track, like with the PhD, they're also finding faculty tenure positions, hopefully, right? Sometime down the line. Okay.
Yeah, I mean everyone that's like yeah, I mean everyone from my cohort in the years above and my current year have found positions that they're happy. Like a lot of people in my cohort all got like really great postdocs or jobs after graduating. And then the people that were like a couple years ahead of me, like they're all now finding like tenure track faculty positions. So I mean it's happening. Um, I just worry sometimes because like I want to stay in Southern California. So my sometimes I feel like I can't cast as wide of a net, which like worries me a little bit. But you know, I I'm still early. Like I just finished my first year of my postdoc, and I have to say that to myself sometime of like sometimes it is good things take time, especially on this route in academia. And sometimes people think that like skipping steps or like getting to somewhere faster is like a good thing or a measure of success. But for
Right.
the first time, I'm having to tell myself that, like, in academia, that's not actually the way success is measured. It's not speed. It's like there's a lot more that like goes into it. And that's hard. It's been a journey for me learning how to adapt to that sort of like mindset and timeline.
I know it's retreat on what you just said. I feel like I'm just like, can I get there already? Like, can I just be, right there, then and done? I think it's all I totally feel you on that as well. And just can when you're, in the program, like your first year, can you walk me through, what was it's the first year kind of like at Harvard, was it kind of like all, lecture based discussions, and then first year was more probably class based, I'm assuming. And then all the way second year, third year, fourth year, like what are some of the differences in like
Yeah.
the curriculum?
Yeah. I can give you that high level overview. So, yeah, year one is definitely like very intensive coursework. And I would say with each semester though, it gets easier and easier. And like my program, even in itself, since I've been a first year, each year they've made the requirements more and more I don't want to say the word lenient, but like more manageable. There we go. That's a good word. So they take into consideration like student mental health and like not and burnout and all that stuff. But yeah, I would say first semester is definitely the most rigorous in terms of coursework, and then each semester gets a little bit better. it was also my experience was also tainted a little bit by COVID and us having to all go like remote. So yeah, that happened at the end of my first year. But second year is still coursework, but much less. And so I felt like I was like almost like coasting, like a lot. Like I've like because I was in California,
Yeah.
taking classes online. And all the classes were in EST or like Eastern time. So I was like getting up at 6 a.m. to like go to all my, and then my day would end at like 1 p.m. like my time. And then I just had like nothing, like I didn't have that much homework. I like was working on some research projects, but not like a ton. And I was like, oh, well, and then it was COVID. I was like, what am I? So I like read a lot of books, watched a lot of TV. I don't know. I felt like I really, you know, enjoyed. And then the second semester of my second year, I was like
Yeah.
intensely preparing for the written exam. So like everyone has their version of some like comprehensive exam, qualifying exam. It's called different things in different places, but that generally happens at like the end of your second year. And that basically determines whether or not you can sort of like, you like kind of got what you needed from the coursework that you did the first 2 years. And every school has like a different version of like what that test or that exam or that essay or whatever looks like. And then from there, then you're kind of like, for the most part, done with coursework. Some people still take a couple classes here or there if they need to. People start to TA, help teach classes. And then you start working on your dissertation. And then at some point in your third year, you'll defend your dissertation aims. Um, and then once you do that, then it's like you're deep into just like getting that dissertation done, however long it may take you between then and graduating. And then it kind of becomes like however you want to fill your time. You get the freedom to do that. And for some people that like really freaks them out because they're like, oh my God, like I just like there's nothing to structure my day and they have to do it themselves. But then for people like me, I'm like, yes, that means I can like go work out at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day and then take a half day to do something fun, but then yeah, maybe I'm like working on a Friday night, but that's okay. It's like I like to be able to build my schedule, and I still do that now, as a postdoc. So that's kind of how I would generally say your experience will be across the years.
And would you say, I know that the qualifying exam, like the second year, would you say that like most of the people will pass, right? It's kind of like, or do you see some people where like they get kind of pushed back by maybe a semester if they don't pass the qualifying exam?
No, it's so rare for that to happen. And like I hope this is the case across the board, but from what I hear, like
Mhm.
those exams are not designed to like have you fail. They're designed so that you can like really showcase like what you've learned. So um, that's I would say like it takes a lot to like not pass something um like that, like a milestone. And like I think the program will also like if they notice that like you're not gonna like they're gonna know like they like if you're not ready and they make sure that you are if that makes sense. Like the program wants all of their students to pass. It looks worse if anything if they're like yeah like
Yeah.
we're getting these students that are not finishing the program. That means it's more reflective of the program than it is on the students. So there's a lot of support, and at least for like my program they like have tutors that are paid for by the department. There's like one of our faculty who's like the best person in the world like would sit with us on Zoom for 3 hours every week just going over like quantitative methods like when we were
Mm.
preparing. And this wasn't like I mean this was the bad thing. It was like because it was Zoom I feel like we were all overstudying because we all had nothing else to do with our lives. But yeah, so there's a lot of support also to get you through the program at various stages.
Okay, well, that's really good to hear because I was just like, oh, I don't know if there's people. It sounds like it's hard to fail, that
It
qualifying
is,
exam.
yes.
And I did want to ask Jessica, you have your MPH background. Right? Did you think that having an MPH, moving into PhD public health program gave you that advantage, right? Or is it kind of like totally new, even though you do have your MPH, did you find that giving you like, a leg up into the program a
Well,
little
a
bit?
lot of public health PhDs won't even like they tell you you need an MPH to be able to apply. So that's
Mhm.
I mean, there was no way that I would have been able to do a PhD or get into a PhD program without my MPH experience. Like, I feel like my MPH gave me, it was that kind of missing link. Like, I had no research experience before then. I like barely could write. Like, I was not, like, the MPH truly was like an experience that gave me the boost that I needed. And then, like, the skills that I needed to then apply for PhD programs. But that said, I like had no like I like almost did not pass my analytic like my stats class in my MPH program. Um so I was like I went into my PhD like not knowing like really anything and I could not even like open R on my computer. But after going through the PhD program, I can actually like use R like I can I'm getting better. Like I can actually do things on my own and like think more intuitively about code and all that stuff and I'm so
I mean,
proud
you're
of
doing it
myself.
now.
Yeah.
You're doing
Well,
it now.
I know, but I'm just saying like I think that there were still skills that I was missing at the end of the MPH, which I then was able to like really learn during like really, really learn in the PhD, like in a way. Yeah. So yeah. Does that answer your question?
No, that definitely does because I'm also the same way. I'm like, I'm really like we did like biostats and I was like, oh, because I'm such a writing girl. Like I'm like, if you take me to do math, I'm like, I wish really I can't do this. I start sweating. But that's good that you start strengthening those skills, as you
Yeah.
progress into the program. So that makes me feel a little bit better. I'm like, well, I still feel like a potato, like so what if
No,
you
no,
haven't
no. You're not a potato. And the thing is like, I think the problem is that like once the learning left the classroom, I started to get the concepts. Like I felt like it wasn't until I was like applying a lot of the statistical methods and the coding and R to like real research projects that were going to result in like published manuscripts. That's when I was like, okay, I need to like really figure out and understand how to do this on a practical level. And then that's when I started building the skills not necessarily like learning it in a classroom. The classroom helped me build the foundational knowledge to then allow me to then really apply it to a project that was real. And that's when I was like, okay, everything's starting to click.
like then this makes
Yeah.
sense in real life. Okay. Well, that's good because I feel like that leads you to the next question. What skills did you develop right during your PhD that you believe were to be like the most valuable, at least to you said, learning R, right? You're definitely doing that. What other skills did you say you would have developed, in the program?
Yeah.
I'm sure
I'm
there's many.
Yeah, well, I definitely developed a lot of teaching and mentoring skills. I mean, I feel like I had that interest and was already starting that in my master's, and that only deepened as I like there were certain semesters where I was TAing like 2 or 3 classes, and I loved that. Like that made me, especially in the years when I was done with coursework, it was just like that was like another way to provide me with a little bit of structure and still feel like I was like going to campus and doing things with other students. So that was another big skill that I cultivated. What else? Definitely like just like understanding how like research works and like how grants work and how you have like kind of the red tape and the administrative stuff behind like all of that like IRB like like I submitted an F31 that didn't get funded so like learning about what it's like to even submit a grant, that's all stuff that I felt like I learned during my PhD too is yeah.
Okay, no, that's good because I was like, because we did projects, in my MPH program. I'm like, oh, like this is a mock grant. But I'm like, if I were to do in real life, I'm like, well, what if, where do I start? Where do I begin? So that's good that, throughout the program that you had those skills that you've cultivated.
Yeah.
And Jessica, what is something that you wish you had known, prior to pursuing your PhD? You're like, oh, I really wish I knew that before I
Yeah.
came into this program.
Well, before I answer that question, I do want to just quickly say is like those skills that I just mentioned, a
Yeah,
lot of those were learned again, not in the classroom. Like the coursework was there and it built a
yeah.
foundation, but it was really like the like non in the classroom stuff that I felt like I really like gained a lot of those skills. Um, okay, now to your question. The thing I wish I knew, I think I made a video about this or something, so I can link it or something, or it's hidden somewhere. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like I wish, well, the funny stuff is like I wish I knew how cold it was going to be in Boston because like it was so um yeah, it was very cold.
It's
And
different.
yeah,
It's different from the West Coast. Yep, yep,
yeah.
yep.
I wish I knew like that COVID was gonna I don't know. I feel like in a way there's like this question is interesting and I get it a lot, but I think part of like the reason why I never have like a straightforward answer or like a definitive answer is like the true answer is there is nothing. And I think the reason why is just because whenever something came up that was somewhat unexpected, I had to just learn how to pivot. And that is going back to your other question. I think another skill that I've had to learn is like
Mhm.
resilience and like not letting things like stick too much when they like, when you get a small rejection, like it's okay to feel sad, but you kind of like have to know that it's not taking it personally and continuing to move forward. And like I feel like that's in a way a skill that I've learned and or I'm still learning and it's very hard. Which is like how do you like how do you battle the like daily almost daily challenges of like being in academia and continue to move forward and still be excited, and I still wake up and I'm very excited to do what I do every day, but how do you kind of navigate those unexpected situations, those not as positive outcomes that you're always going to get, and that sort of like knowing how to adapt has been a skill and also just something that I think is I guess is important. So yeah, I wish I knew that I was going to need to be so adaptable because you do run into a lot of ups and downs, and just being prepared to experience that is important, and having a good sort of mindset I think going into that is important too, so that not everything really like starts then that's how you start to like really get the burnout and like not feeling like you want to keep moving forward and really frustrated.
No, I think absolutely, like, the resiliency key, I think that is just, like, so key to throughout the journeys. It's so long too, right? It's years down the road, and I did wanna ask, Jessica, like, the work-life balance, right? You're talking, second year, it's so much time, after classwork,
Okay.
but, overall work-life balance, I feel like in my head, I'm just like, PhD students are, TAing, they're grading, I just feel like to me, when I seem like, oh my God, it's gonna be crazy. Like I feel like the work-life balance, I'm like, is there some work-life balance between, students in the program, right? I feel like as you progress, obviously there's gonna be more things to do, more responsibilities and stuff like that. So what did that work-life balance look like for you?
Yeah. Great question. I love this question because I always say that it is more than possible. Like I feel like I was like truly a very happy PhD student. I did everything that I could to like make sure. And I think it's sorry, I think my husband is coming home. I'll let him pass through before we continue. Hi. Sorry, I'm recording a call. No worries. Um, but yeah, so I think that it is very much like a stereotype, not stereotype. What's the word I'm looking for? I think people like to say like PhD students don't have a life,
Yeah.
or like they're cost. And I think that there probably are a lot of PhD students who feel that way and find themselves in that situation. But for me, I just was very intentional about like, I don't care if I am not perfect at like, I don't get a good score on my problem set or like, I'm not turning in the best, possible, assignment. but I'm going to go to my workout class today. I'm going to, at after a certain time, I like just stop working, I turn on the TV and I like just relax. And I've been very intentional about doing that. And also to like making time for friends and family and fun. I don't know, like I feel like my all of my friends, like we had fun and like, there were points there obviously again, it's a role, there's ups and downs. There'll be times when you are more busy and you don't have as much time, but then there'll be times where you feel like you can really enjoy and like take it easy and do all that. But I don't know. I had such a fun PhD experience. Like I felt like I got to do it all. Like I felt like I was really productive and I made a lot of friends. I had fun in Boston. I like, kept up with my health and my fitness and like got to fly home to California a lot to see my family, made time for that. So, I'm also very like strict at scheduling. Like I'm like very much like I create a schedule and I stick to it. I have my to-do list. So I'm very organized in that
You
sense.
are, you
And
are, Jess.
I yeah, and I
Yeah,
organize my like my fun time and my relaxing time and like, you know, and I'm intentional about that. And I think you just have to be that way or else what happens is like your coursework, your research, or the work starts to like just sort of, you know, kind of seep into everything and you have to keep those boundaries. And I just worked really hard to keep those boundaries. Yeah.
oh my God. I wish, you know what? You're like the stellar example, Jessica. Like, I feel like you're like working out, you're having all these great things. But that's like I think that's optimistic for me to hear because I'm always like, oh, like in my head, that stereotype, right? It's like you're drowning in your work. But I'm glad to hear like this fun and fresh, perspective from you, someone who's been through the program, especially as well. And when you're in the program, I know for some you're matching with a faculty member. How did that look like? When you went to into the program, did you already match with someone previously, or kind of like, I like their research? How did that come about to find like your faculty mentor?
Yeah.
Um,
So what I did is I actually um before applying, like would like email professors being like, "Hey, you and I like do similar research. Can we hop on a phone call just to talk more?" And then I would have phone calls with at least one faculty member that did something related. So for me at the time, if they did some kind of tobacco related research, they were someone that I identified as okay, like at least our topic areas are somewhat similar. And then from there, if the phone call went well and I felt like we like sort of gelled as like mentor mentee, then I would be like, okay. And then depending on how the conversation usually would go in the direction of like, you sound like a great fit. You can put me on your like application as like a potential mentor that we chatted. So I was identifying mentors like at that point. And then generally like what happens is like if you don't do something like that as you interview, like then you'll kind of like meet other faculty and professors that might be a good match. But like definitely it's not like you don't hear anything and then suddenly like the day you get in they're like, oh, by the way, here's your advisor that you've never heard of. So there's generally a way of matching, and it might be different for different programs and different schools depending on who the faculty are, etc. But um it's definitely not like a last minute type of decision.
Gotcha. So would you say like applying to this specific program, you kind of want to have an idea coming in just
Yes.
to, how would that benefit you, right? Because otherwise it sounds like you're going to be randomly assigned. And for those who did get randomly assigned, can they kind of swap out of it or you're kind of like stuck with the
You're
same
never
faculty?
No, you're definitely not stuck with anyone. This is your PhD experience. You're always welcome to, I mean, it's probably not easy. Like it's definitely probably like lots of bureaucratic red tape and probably departmental politics if you do decide to switch advisors. But it's definitely accepted and it's not gonna like, make or like it's not gonna like hold keep you from getting your PhD if you decide to switch advisors. But another thing that is important to note is that your advisor is not your only mentor in your entire PhD program. Like I found other mentors who were in the department as well as outside of my department, outside of my school, who provided mentorship. We worked on projects together. Your dissertation committee needs to have more than one person. That's why it's a committee. So just know that, like, if you feel like you're missing a little something from your advisor, that's normal, because the whole point is that you're supposed to kind of find a team of mentors that are going to provide you mentorship in different ways, and that's how you then kind of learn a lot more. It's not just supposed to be you and your mentor, that's it.
No, that's good to hear because I'm sure there's like a wide network of, especially, at the Harvard program. I'm sure there's so many, wonderful faculty that you can network with, which I'm like, okay, like this is wonderful that you
Yeah.
can.
And it's not
That-
just Harvard. There's like
Mhm.
Boston Children's Hospital. There
Right.
is Mass General. Like, I was working with people at like the affiliated centers. And so that's also important to note too, is like wherever you
Mhm.
end up going for your PhD, if that institution has like partnerships with other institutions in the same city, or other hospitals or other healthcare centers that also have faculty doing research, those are all potential people that you could collaborate with easily. Yeah.
No, and did that kind of influence kind of like your research project, right? When you're in the program, or was that kind of based of like, what your faculty member was doing, at that time? Let me just, see what, or is it kind of like your idea when you started doing your dissertation on your specific
Yeah.
topic?
So my advisor was actually doing very different. Like, the population that he was focusing on for tobacco prevention was more, um, you know, low income housing and
Mhm.
secondhand smoke exposure. Whereas like I was really interested in the adolescent vaping epidemic. So he still provided great sort of like research and like mentorship, and helped me get my aims together. Like, they can still help you like with the overall, like how to write a good proposal. But what happened is, like, another mentor that I had did have a was currently collecting data that was more about like adolescent vaping, and vaping of nicotine and cannabis, which is at that time what he and I were like, ooh, this is kind of like a good, like, kind of the next like big thing we think in that people really should need to pay more attention to and research. So I sort of like went with that, and then kind of found other data sources to then come up with my full dissertation.
I feel like that's like the connection, right? Connections of connection to find that, true match. Obviously your faculty member is
Yeah.
doing something similar. So I love that story that you had there. And so, when you're thinking about, applying to your postdoc, right? Your current position, I was kind of curious, how did you figure that out? I'm assuming you wanted to move back to the West Coast because
Yeah.
Boston winters are just absolutely
Yeah.
just brutal, right? You're just like, I just want to be close to home. I'm assuming that's what happened, but is that something that you're like, let me just apply to these academic institutions in Cali?
So I always feel bad when people ask me this question, because I have a very useless answer, which is that I went back to my mentor who I interned with when I was a master's student. So she already had this job sort of waiting for me for years. It was always a joke. She was like, "You're gonna come back and be my postdoc, right?" And I was like, I guess so. And then, like, maybe, I don't know. And then, come my third, fourth year, we're like, oh wow, like my mentor was like, I do have funding for you. Do you want to come here? And I was like, I do. so
Wow.
so I was lucky. I didn't apply anywhere else. I didn't apply to anything. I was just like, okay, yeah. I didn't even have to apply to this. Like, I just went, I think all they needed was my CV, and then I was good. So
Wow. That is like the dream come true. I feel like that's very full circle, which is like crazy to think about. Like the
it is.
mentor that, the same mentor that you did your undergrad, your MPH degree with is now coming back, after a PhD. I feel like
Yeah,
that's just like a full story. I feel like she'd feel good story to have
it
had that
is. Yeah.
in place. Oh my goodness. Well, thanks for letting me know. I'm just like, oh, maybe she applied,
Yeah.
or anything like that. And one of my last questions I want to ask, I feel like for me, I'm always thinking like, that imposter syndrome, right? I feel like it's always thinking like, oh my goodness, am I ever good enough? Am I writing good enough? Am I even belonging to this institute? Is that something that, that you're still working with, or, throughout the program that you definitely felt like you felt? And, how did you kind of overcome that as well?
So that's a great question. And I mean, there are definitely times where I do feel like, okay, like, am I doing enough? Like, is this, but I don't know. I always tell people this, like, you are good enough. Like, everyone is good enough. Like, and I feel like I really believed in that. And so there's never been a time where I'm like I am confident in my like I'm like I can succeed at these great institutions. I know I can. I know everybody can. And it's like shame on the people who like try to put other people down or tell people that they can't succeed, which sadly does happen, and I feel, and I think that's why I want to go into academia and like, be able to mentor these students because I want to stop this cycle of like people feeling like, oh no, like there are people, professors, faculty, whoever, who have made students feel in a way that they don't belong and they can't succeed. So I want to acknowledge that it definitely happens. Like, it's, I think a lot of institutions, like there is still this feeling and a lot of students feel that way. And, um, all and I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I just do everything I can to tell people, I'm like, you have to just set that aside and you keep moving forward and like, know that your worth is not based on like what these random people think about you. And, it's really on, who you are, and everyone is amazing. Everyone deserves to be a PhD program. There's just unfortunately systemic things in place that we have to just kind of overcome and or like work through, and we're still figuring that out. So,
No, absolutely.
I
I
mean,
feel
there are days where I'm still like, am I ever going to become a professor? Like, I
like
genuinely, this keeps me up at night. Like, or, it's hard. Like, I definitely, that's my imposter syndrome of like, I feel like I'm never going to become a professor. So,
don't say
um,
that. Like, I feel like
I feel,
in
yeah.
my eyes, I'm like, oh, Professor Lou, in my eyes, I feel like I could totally see it. Like, whatever. I could totally see it. Absolutely. Like
Uh,
110%, I could see it. I mean, I feel like this is our first time meeting, but I'm like, I could definitely see it in you.
uh,
So no, but I think I went to a symposium when I think this is 2 weeks ago, and they were talking. It's a a women in STEM, seminar, and they're talking about imposter syndrome, and these people are like head of Novartis, CEOs, CFOs, and they're just like I think they say like imposter syndrome is really environmentally created, right? I feel like it's not you, it's the environment that you're put in that you feel some sort of way, whether that's you don't feel not good enough. So I was like, oh, that like really like shed light on that. It's really the built-in environment that one may be in.